The roses had wilted before they arrived. Eleanor watched them slump in the vase like tired dancers bowing to emptiness. They were meant to arrive fresh and full, a tradition 12 years old. She used to love the smell. But this year they arrived 2 days late, the petals browning at the edges. No note, no signature, just a delivery receipt, as impersonal as the silence echoing through the house. The penthouse was quiet except for the faint hum of the elevator. Eleanor sat by the window, dressed in the deep blue blouse Grant had once said made her eyes look less tired. She smoothed it over her lap, adjusting the silk folds around the seatbelt of her wheelchair. It still smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish. Outside, the city glistened in late afternoon gold, the same city that had once cheered for them. The Langfords, power couple, media darlings, philanthropy's finest. Until the accident, until her legs stopped moving, and his attention started drifting. She refreshed her phone screen again. There it was. New beginnings, the caption read, stamped across her husband's verified social media account. A photo of Grant standing on the deck of a yacht, one hand, resting possessively on the rounded belly of a glowing younger woman. Lila, his mistress, draped in designer silk and wearing Eleanor's stolen future like a trophy. The post already had 88,000 likes. The comments read like confetti at a cruel parade. Wow, power couple. She's glowing, congrats. Upgrade. Eleanor didn't cry. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and like, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. She hadn't in a long time. Instead, she clicked off the screen, set the phone aside, and wheeled slowly to the fireplace. On the mantel sat a faded photograph. Her and Grant on their wedding night, champagne flutes raised. She stared at it, a moment, then turned the frame face down. Her reflection in the window stared back at her. Pale. Still, a ghost in her own life. She turned and rolled to the drawer by her writing desk. The lock clicked open. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, dark burgundy embossed with a single gold letter. E. She hadn't opened it since the night of the accident. But tonight, something inside her trembled awake. Not sadness, not even rage, something colder, cleaner. She opened the journal. The last entry was smudged with rain from that night. Dinner at 8. Must wear flats. No heels this time. She stared at the words like they belonged to someone else. Then she flipped to a new page. She uncapped the pen slowly. The click echoed, too loud in the quiet room. Today he made me invisible. Tomorrow I become unforgettable. She wrote the sentence without shaking, then closed the journal, placed it back in the drawer, and locked it. In the corner of the room, the digital clock blinked. 6:12 p.m. Their anniversary dinner would have just started. Somewhere, Grant was toasting to new beginnings, his hand on someone else's life. Here, in silence, Eleanor was preparing her ending, and his. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel powerless. Eleanor's handwriting lingered on the page like a bruise. Today he made me invisible. Tomorrow I become unforgettable. But it hadn't always been this way. There was a time when Grant had adored her. Before the silence, before the pitying looks, before the cold. She had been brilliant, laughing in galleries, raising glasses at galas, signing her name on hospital wings as if the world could be rebuilt with good intentions and beautiful shoes. And then, the staircase. It was early winter. 1 glass of red, wine, a heated argument. She remembered the flash of marble under her feet, the blurred ceiling spinning, then pain, screaming pain, then silence. When she woke up in the hospital, Grant was holding her hand. Tight. Too tight. His expression was unreadable, more like someone watching a stock crash than grieving a wife. He told her it was an accident, that she slipped, that the marble was always slick in December. She remembered something else, his fingers on her shoulder, his voice low and cold before the fall. You always think you're smarter than me, Eleanor. You're not. But no one believed her, not even herself. The official report said she was intoxicated. The bruises on her arms were consistent with the fall. The CCTV had been mysteriously erased during a scheduled software update. Just gone. Back then she'd tried to speak up. She'd ask questions. Grant had smiled, soft and patronizing. "Babe, don't stress yourself. You don't want people thinking you're unstable." After everything that's happened, one by one her friends stopped calling. Her favorite house staff were reassigned or fired. Her world shrunk to the four walls of their penthouse and her wheelchair. He stopped sleeping beside her, stopped asking for her opinion. Instead, he began referring to her in the third person. Eleanor's tired. Eleanor's adjusting. It's been hard for her. She doesn't want visitors. Even when she was in the room, she became a ghost in her own life. Worse still were the words he chose when they were alone. "You used to be beautiful. You used to move like someone with purpose. You should be grateful I stayed." And the worst of them all, whispered late one night as he walked past her chair, "If it had been me in that chair, you would have left." Her body still, her voice dismissed. But inside her head, Eleanor was screaming. Then came the whispers about Lila. At first just rumors, long meetings, quiet dinners, glowing mentions in tabloid columns. Grant denied it all, even smiled when asked. "She's just my brand consultant," he would say, winking. Brilliant with digital reach. Eleanor had met her once. Lila was young, stylish, magnetic. And when their eyes met, Eleanor saw something flicker in the girl's face. Not cruelty. Something worse. Pity. She had smiled gently, then looked away, as if Eleanor were a photo of someone who used to matter. Back in the present, Eleanor sat by the window again, the city lights, flickering like tiny judgmental eyes. She flexed her fingers, at least those still worked. Enough to write. Enough to plan. The journal was still in the drawer, locked, waiting. And somewhere across town, Lila was probably asleep beside Grant, dreaming of a life Eleanor once called her own. But tonight, that dream would begin to crack. The television's glow flickered across Eleanor's face like candlelight at a funeral. She didn't blink, didn't move. She just watched. On screen, Lila beamed beneath soft studio lights, her long hair curled into perfect waves, her silk maternity dress clinging tastefully to her pronounced belly. She looked radiant, carefully constructed, like a campaign poster for rebirth. The interviewer leaned in. "So, this is a new chapter for both of you?" Lila smiled, modest, almost bashful. "Yes, Grant and I are incredibly excited. He's been my biggest supporter. He says this baby is our fresh start, a new beginning. A new beginning." Eleanor's lips didn't move, but her knuckles whitened on the armrest. Funny, she thought. Grant used to say that same line to her the night after the accident. "We'll start over, just the two of us. A new beginning." Now he was using it again. Only this time she wasn't in the picture. The camera panned briefly to a behind-the-scenes photo of Grant rubbing Lila's belly, whispering something into her ear. Her laugh was frozen mid-giggle, intimate, intoxicating. Eleanor turned off the television. Silence swelled like a tide in the room. She let it linger. Then she wheeled herself to the desk. One by one, folders emerged from a false panel beneath the drawers. Years of documentation, emails, printed bank statements, security. Footage, timestamps, phone call logs. Most of them were circumstantial, but taken together, they told a story. Not yet loud enough to be believed, but detailed enough to be dangerous. Eleanor opened her laptop. The screen bathed her in sterile white. She opened a blank document. "What they did to me, what he covered up, ends now." She stared at the blinking cursor, then erased the sentence. Instead, she typed just one line. "Let the world know." She saved it, encrypted it, sent a copy to a cloud account only Marcus had access to, then closed the lid. Her hand hovered over a small metal box tucked behind, a stack of notebooks. She pulled it forward. Inside were voice recordings, dozens of them. Moments Grant never knew she captured. She selected one. Pressed play. His voice, smooth and venomous, hissed through the small speaker. "If she tries anything, I'll paint her as unstable. Trust me, no one questions a man when the wife's in a wheelchair." She stopped the tape. The room was quiet. Again. Her eyes shifted to a framed picture on the bookshelf. Her and Grant on their honeymoon. Greece. Before everything. Before the lies. She took the frame down, opened the back. Behind the photo was a folded slip of paper. One of the few things she ever wrote longhand after the accident. "If he takes my voice, I'll use my silence." She unfolded it now, smoothed the creases. Outside, the city pulsed with noise and light. Somewhere out there, Lila was living the fantasy Eleanor once had, believing the man beside her was safe. But Eleanor knew better. And this time she wasn't going to be quiet. She placed the photo face down on the shelf and wheeled back to the window. Below, traffic moved like red veins through the city. So many lives. So many lies. Eleanor blinked slowly, her reflection overlapping with the skyline. This wasn't a new beginning. This was the middle of the end. The parking garage was nearly empty. Concrete pillars stood like silent sentinels in the dark, their shadows pooling beneath flickering lights. The only sound was the distant hum of a ventilation fan and the faint clack of Eleanor's wheelchair tires on the oil-stained floor. She stopped near the back beside an unmarked black sedan. The driver's door opened. Marcus stepped out. He hadn't changed much. Same thick-rimmed glasses. Same overgrown stubble that tried and failed to hide the weight on his conscience. He looked at her with a softness that most people reserved for the injured, but she cut him off before he could speak. "Don't say you're sorry." He gave a short nod and crouched beside her. "You were right to leave when you did," she added. "But I need you now." From her coat pocket, she pulled out a small USB drive and a sealed manila envelope, thick with folded documents and handwritten notes. "These are copies," she said. "The originals are somewhere safe." He held them in both hands, almost reverently. "What's on this?" he asked. She glanced over her shoulder. The garage was still empty, but her voice dropped anyway. "Remember the night of the gala? The fall?" He stiffened. "He said it was an accident, that the cameras were down." She gave a cold smile. "They weren't." Marcus exhaled slowly. Years ago, he had been the Langford's family lawyer, until he got too close to something Grant didn't want him to see. A quiet severance followed with a generous NDA and the unspoken threat of career ruin. He left town shortly after, but Eleanor had called him back. "And the envelope?" he asked. Her voice was quieter now, measured. "It has enough to start. An inquiry, the names of women he paid off, phone logs. I even included the medical report I wasn't supposed to see, one that says my injuries are inconsistent with a fall." Marcus opened his mouth, but she stopped him again. "If anything happens to me," she said, "go public. Use everything. I don't care what it costs anymore." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Somewhere overhead, a car rolled across the upper level, tires groaning over concrete. "You're sure about this?" Marcus finally asked. "He's having a baby, Marcus. He's rebuilding his empire. He thinks he's untouchable. I need you to remind him he's not." He nodded once. Then she handed him one last thing, a folded index card with a handwritten code. "It unlocks the cloud archive. If I don't log in every 72 hours, it auto-forwards to every major outlet." Marcus looked at the card, then at her. His voice was barely audible. "This isn't just about justice anymore, is it?" Eleanor looked away, her face unreadable. "It's about making sure no one else ends up in a chair." She turned her chair and began rolling back toward the elevator, her shadow stretching long behind her in the garage light. Marcus stood there, watching her go, holding the evidence of a decade of silence. As the elevator doors closed, Eleanor's reflection shimmered faintly in the metal surface. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, But in her eyes, something sparked. It wasn't revenge. It was resolve. The ballroom shimmered with gold and glass, chandeliers glittering above designer gowns and diamond cufflinks. Laughter rang out in carefully measured bursts, like background music for the powerful. Grant stood near the head of the room, champagne flute in hand, the king of his curated empire. Lila glided beside him in a pearl-white gown, one hand resting over her baby bump. Photographers captured every angle. Headlines were already writing themselves. And then, the music didn't stop. The lights didn't dim, but the air shifted. A hush, soft but sharp, cut through the clink of silverware and the hum of idle chatter. The doors had opened, and Eleanor rolled in. Her dress was black. Not the submissive black of mourning, but the sleek, commanding black of control. Her posture was tall despite the chair, her shoulders squared, her chin slightly raised. She moved without aid, without apology. Gasps were swallowed behind wine. Glasses. Lila's hand tightened on Grant's arm. He looked up, and for a fraction of a second, just one, his smile faltered. Then came the laugh. Short. Cruel. Practiced. Grant stepped forward, arms spread in mock delight. Guests watched, unsure if they should join the joke or the silence. His voice was smooth, welcoming in tone, venom in intent. But Eleanor didn't respond, didn't even look at him. Her eyes roamed the room like she'd been here 1,000 times. In a way she had. This room, this crowd, once her world. Now, her stage. She wheeled slowly past the tables. Faces turned, forks froze. One woman awkwardly adjusted her necklace. A man near the orchestra dropped his napkin and didn't bother picking it up. Lila tried to reclaim the spotlight, guiding her pregnant belly into the foreground, radiating innocence and soft charm. Grant placed a possessive hand on her back, leaning in to whisper something performative. Eleanor didn't blink. She stopped at a vacant table near the front, meant to remain empty, a silent nod to her absence. She took it. A waiter appeared, hesitant. She waved him away. The flash drive rested in her lap, hidden beneath a lace clutch. Her fingers curled around it, not tightly, confidently. Across the room, Grant raised his glass. "Cheers," he mouthed, smirking. Eleanor tilted her head slightly. Her gaze met his, level, calm, unreadable. And something behind his smirk twitched. The guests began to shift uneasily. Small talk resumed, more forced now. Lila whispered something into Grant's ear and giggled, but no one laughed with her. Photographers stopped taking pictures. Eleanor placed her folded napkin in her lap, motionless, unbothered. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone was louder than any toast Grant could offer. From the shadows, Marcus watched. Tuxedoed, blending in, eyes sharp. His phone buzzed. A confirmation. The drive has been cloned. Across the room, Grant finally looked away. Eleanor smiled, only slightly. Just enough to unnerve him. From the outside, the apartment looked abandoned, an old walk-up above a tailor's shop on the east side of the city. No name on the buzzer, no lights in the windows. Just another forgotten space in a city that moves too fast to look twice. But inside, it was a war room. Marcus entered quietly, locking the door behind him. The dim glow of a single desk lamp cast shadows over the walls, lined with folders, thumbtacks, and red thread. Notebooks, hard drives, burner phones, flash drives labeled with dates and initials. It wasn't chaos, it was precision. In the center of the room sat Eleanor's backup laptop, the same one she used with voice software and a secure VPN. On screen, a dashboard of social media profiles, encrypted emails, blog posts, and whistleblower accounts. Eleanor had lived 2 lives. The silent, broken wife at home, and Vox Clara, the anonymous advocate quietly igniting a firestorm online. Marcus scrolled through one of her latest posts. Powerful men have long hidden behind charitable foundations, glossy PR, and staged kindness. But silence is a tool of complicity. If you can't stand, then speak. If they try to erase you, leave marks they can't wash off. Attached was a photo, blurred for legal protection, of a man in a tuxedo grabbing a woman's wrist outside a gala. The man's face wasn't fully visible, but it looked familiar. Lila sat in the penthouse nursery, flipping absently through a baby book she hadn't chosen. Everything around her was Grant's idea. Gold-trimmed crib, designer wallpaper, monogrammed baby blankets. She felt like a guest in a life she was supposed to be living. A tabloid alert buzzed her phone. She ignored it. Instead, she opened a message from her assistant, a link to an article titled, "The Charade of Care, Abuse Hiding Behind Philanthropy." Curious, she tapped it. The article was from Vox Clara. She skimmed it lazily until a paragraph stopped her cold. At the 2016 Langford Foundation Gala, one anonymous attendee reported seeing an unnamed board member assault a domestic staffer during a private altercation. The woman was silenced through an NDA and a quiet relocation. No charges were filed. Lila stared at the screen. That was the year Eleanor's accident happened. Her fingers hovered above her phone. Her throat tightened. Was this about Grant? She searched Vox Clara Langford. Dozens of entries came up, discreet, tactful, but clearly drawing a pattern. Suggestions of coercion, manipulation, silencing tactics. Never accusations, only questions. But questions sharpened suspicion. Back at the apartment, Marcus received a message from Eleanor. Tell Lila where to look. She deserves to choose what kind of woman she wants to be. He hesitated, then pulled out a separate envelope, already prepared in Eleanor's handwriting. Lila's name was on the front. That night, a concierge knocked at the penthouse. Lila opened the door. "Delivery for Miss Reynolds," the man said, handing her a small, unmarked envelope. She locked the nursery door, sat on the floor, and opened. Inside was a note. "If you want to protect your child, know who the father truly is." And below it, a login and password. Her hands shook, but she opened her laptop, logged in, and gasped. The knock came just after midnight. Soft, hesitant. Eleanor was already awake. She rarely slept now. Not truly. Dreams had become unreliable things, often wrapped in Grant's voice and the echo of wheels skidding across marble. She unlocked the door, slowly. Lila stood in the hallway, shivering under a long coat, eyes wide, with something between fear and desperation. Her makeup had smudged and one of her earrings was missing. Eleanor said nothing. She turned and rolled back inside, leaving the door open. Lila entered without waiting for permission. The room was quiet, dimly lit by a single lamp. Papers were stacked on every surface, organized chaos. A candle burned near the window, flickering against the glass like a warning light. Lila stood in the middle of the room, clutching a folded sheet of paper. "He told me," she said, voice, "saw that the night you fell, you begged for it. That you said you couldn't handle being broken." Eleanor didn't move. Lila's voice cracked. "He said you cried and begged, and he told me he stayed with you out of pity." Still, Eleanor remained silent. Then she opened the drawer of the small desk beside her, pulled out a thick envelope, handed it to Lila without a word. Inside were two things, a handwritten letter and a flash drive. Lila sat down. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. It wasn't long. If I was weak, it was because I still loved him. If I stayed silent, it was because I thought I could protect someone I once believed in. But silence only feeds cruelty. I didn't beg for death. He whispered it into my ear and told me it would be easier for us both. Lila looked up, her lip quivering. I didn't know." Eleanor motioned toward the laptop. Lila inserted the flash drive with shaky fingers. The audio clicked on. There was a long pause, then Grant's voice, clear, composed, and terrifyingly casual. "If she gets in the way again, we'll handle it. There are ways, pills, slips, car breaks. Everyone mourns a tragedy. No one questions a wife who couldn't cope. A silence followed. Then another voice, a man unfamiliar, responded, "You sure you want to go that far?" Grant chuckled. "Let's just say I've been further." Lila hit pause. Her breath caught in her throat. The room spun. Everything, the nursery, the dinners, the promises, it all fractured under the weight of that recording. He planned to. She couldn't finish. Eleanor just watched her. For a brief moment, something sharp passed between them. Not quite forgiveness, not friendship, but understanding. Lila wiped her eyes. "Why give this to me?" Eleanor's voice was barely above a whisper. "Because you still have time." Lila stood clutching the flash drive like it might burn her. She didn't say goodbye, just turned and fled. The door clicked shut behind her. Eleanor remained at the window, watching headlights drift along the streets below. She had seen that look on Lila's face before, in her own mirror, years ago. The look of someone waking up inside a nightmare that had always worn a smile. The Langford estate glittered under the afternoon sun, adorned in pastel silk ribbons and gold-trimmed balloons. Photographers fluttered around like moths to wealth, capturing every smile, every curated moment. Lila stood at the center in a rose-colored maternity gown, her hand resting on her belly like it was porcelain. She smiled, but only with her mouth. Grant moved through the crowd like a politician, kissing cheeks, shaking hands, thanking donors. He hadn't noticed Lila hadn't touched him once. In the far corner of the garden, beneath a canopy of white roses, a journalist from the Chronicle checked her phone. A new email. No subject line. Just an attachment titled, "For the Truth." She tapped it open. A series of folders appeared. Langford Confidential, NDA, silencing payments.pdf, audio grant Eleanor threat.m4a, hospital records manipulated.jpg, testimony Marcus Docyax. Her breath caught. Across the yard, Grant raised a glass. "To new beginnings," he declared, voice polished, eyes gleaming. The crowd clapped, and then heels clicked on stone. Heads turned, and there she was, Eleanor, in black again, sleek, serene, a single white lily pinned near her collarbone. She rolled in through the open garden gate like a ghost who refused to stay buried. For a moment the party froze. Then came the whispers, the camera flashes. Lila locked eyes with her, startled but steady. Grant's jaw tightened. His voice faltered. What is she doing here?" The journalist's phone pinged again. "Post. Now." She didn't hesitate. One tap, one breath, and the world began to crack. Screens lit up within minutes. Phones buzzed across the lawn. A nearby PR intern turned pale. One of the caterers gasped. Someone dropped a glass that shattered against stone. The headline spread like gasoline. Langford exposed, alleged. Abuse, audio evidence, legal cover-ups, videos autoplayed. Grant's voice, his threats, his jokes about Eleanor's disability. Her fall. The crowd began to shift. Some guests quietly slipped away. Others stared at Grant, waiting for denial, outrage, anything. But he stood frozen, blinking into a silence he couldn't control. Eleanor didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She rolled slowly past him, close enough for him to see the calm in her eyes. That terrifying, graceful calm. He knew. She'd waited for this. Lila turned to her, visibly shaken. Eleanor gave her a single nod, acknowledging something unspoken, then rolled toward the exit. Photographers followed her now. Not Lila, not Grant. Her as. She passed the journalist. She offered a folded piece of paper. No words, just a glance. The journalist opened it after she left. It read, "Justice doesn't always knock. Sometimes it walks." Back inside the estate, Grant tried to raise his voice, tried to summon the room back to his control, but the moment was gone. His kingdom of illusion was crumbling. One screenshot, one quote, one truth at a time. And somewhere in the chaos, a new photo emerged. Eleanor leaving the shower. Backlit by sunlight, smiling, finally, not bitter, not broken, free. The empire didn't collapse all at once. It cracked first, a quiet article on a lesser-known blog. Then a Twitter thread from a women's rights activist. Then a statement from the Chronicle citing ongoing legal review. Then came the avalanche. The media rebranded Grant Langford overnight, from billionaire philanthropist to alleged abuser. Every polished interview, every charity gala, every baby announcement now looked like cover art for a scandal. Offshore accounts were the first to be traced, hidden in shell companies, layered through foreign trusts, millions rerouted, untaxed. Undeclared, then came the NDAs, over a dozen, some handwritten, others professionally notarized. Most linked to young women who had once worked under Grant, assistants, interns, house staff. Each document carried the same warning: silence, in exchange for financial comfort, and legal threats if broken. And then, Eleanor's medical file, falsified. Her original hospital report had been altered 3 days after her fall. The word blunt force trauma had been replaced with accidental misstep. Witness statements disappeared, security footage corrupted, but not all of it. One former employee came forward anonymously, voice distorted, face hidden. On camera, they said, "I saw him standing at the top of the stairs. She wasn't even facing him. He yelled something, she turned, and then he shoved her and walked away." The footage cut to silence. At the penthouse, Lila stood in the nursery. Now, empty. The gold crib was gone. The wallpaper peeled where sunlight had once kissed the wall. She packed slowly, not because she had doubts, because she was scared of how long she hadn't had any. She looked around the room Grant once said would erase the past. Now, it reeked of it. In her suitcase, she placed a tiny ultrasound photo and a small envelope Eleanor had sent her a day after the shower. Inside was a single line: "Do not let his name become your child's first lie." She zipped the suitcase, called a car, and didn't say goodbye. Back at the Langford estate, Grant was unraveling, mirrors covered, phones disconnected, lawyers swarming. But it wasn't the media that shook him. It was the silence from Eleanor. She hadn't gloated, hadn't spoken publicly, hadn't responded to interview requests or posted a single word, and that terrified him more than the headlines. He slammed a folder onto his desk, financial statements now red-flagged by federal investigators. Every lie he thought was buried was now screaming from inboxes across the country. His lawyer muttered warnings: asset seizure, possible arrest, frozen accounts. Grant didn't hear him. He was thinking of one thing: the letter Eleanor left on her side of the bed the night after the accident. He had burned it, but the words haunted him still. "You don't have to kill someone to destroy them. Just teach them to hate themselves slowly." Now the police were asking questions, not polite ones, official ones. Eleanor hadn't pressed charges. Yet. But the house felt different now. The walls thinner, the air heavier. And the past. It wasn't behind him anymore. It was knocking. The auditorium wasn't grand. Just a modest hall inside a women's resource center with worn carpeting and folding chairs. But the live stream link had already reached over 800,000 viewers within the first 10 minutes. News outlets scrambled to embed it. Social media lit up with the headline, "Eleanor Langford to speak, first time since her accident." She sat beside a wooden podium, her wheelchair silent but firm, framed by soft blue curtains. A single microphone was adjusted to her height. Marcus stood off stage, arms folded, eyes locked on the crowd. There were no reporters shouting questions, no dramatic music. Just the quiet click of cameras and the hum of anticipation. Eleanor's hands didn't shake. She looked directly into the lens of the center camera and began. "For years I believed silence was safer. That telling the truth would cost me the last pieces of my life. And maybe it has. But I also realized something. She paused, letting her breath settle. I may have lost movement, but I never lost my truth. Across the country, people stopped what they were doing. In cafes, in waiting rooms, in boardrooms with the door quietly shut. Her voice was steady, not rehearsed, but raw and resolute. The man who promised to protect me once called me a burden. He said I was weak, that no one would believe me because I couldn't walk, couldn't scream, couldn't fight back. But every day since, I have fought, with every breath, every word I didn't say, until now. She reached into a folder beside her and lifted a single photograph. This is what strength looks like. It was a hospital image. Her broken body in the aftermath. Wounds carefully hidden by gowns and smiles now shown under harsh white light. This is what silence does when we pretend it's mercy. The audience didn't applaud. They didn't need to. They listened, and they believed. In a quiet apartment, Lila watched from her phone. The baby stirred in the bassinet beside her, unaware of the moment unfolding. Lila's eyes glistened. Eleanor hadn't mentioned Grant by name. Not once. And yet, he was the loudest presence in the silence that followed every sentence. Lila whispered, under her breath, "You did it." Back in the auditorium, Eleanor leaned forward slightly. I speak not just for myself, but for every woman told she was overreacting, for every victim who thought a mansion was safer than a shelter, for every person made to choose between love and survival. You are not invisible. I see you, and you are not alone. One by one, hands rose in the audience. Tears welled in strangers' eyes. Some women stood, wordless in solidarity. Others clutched each other. Victims began to come forward, online, in comments, in emails flooding the center's inbox. One post read, "I thought I was the only one. Thank you, Eleanor. You gave me the courage to speak." Another, "My husband told me my wheelchair made me less of a woman. Today, I know better." By nightfall, hashtags were trending. Her voice, finally. Believe Eleanor. No more silence. Grants. Lawyers issued a rushed statement denying everything, but it didn't matter, because the world had already chosen whom to believe. And Eleanor? She rolled off stage, past cameras and lights and noise, into a hallway where Marcus waited with a quiet nod. She didn't cry. She just exhaled. For the first time in years, it sounded like freedom. The arrest came quietly. No sirens, no chaos, just a knock on the penthouse door and a pair of federal agents in dark suits, their expressions unreadable. Grant opened the door in a robe, still groggy from the pills he'd taken the night before to silence his spinning thoughts. He barely had time to ask a question before the cuffs clicked around his wrists. "Grant Langford, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, falsification of medical records, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit aggravated assault." He blinked, stunned. You can't be serious." But they were. And this time, no amount of charm or cash could erase the evidence. The flash of cameras as he was escorted to the waiting car lit up the entire street. His neighbors peeked from windows. His staff stood frozen. One of them, a doorman who had always tipped his hat, turned away. Inside the car, Grant looked back at the building, his empire. The glass no longer gleamed. It looked hollow, just like him. Eleanor didn't watch it live. She had no interest in his downfall becoming another media circus. She had already endured too many headlines that reduced her to the disabled wife or the woman behind the scandal. Today she returned home. Not to the mansion. She'd sold it. She returned to her quiet two-bedroom cottage on the coast, where the air always smelled like salt, and the floor was uneven enough to remind her that not everything needed to be smooth. Marcus was there when she arrived. He handed her the house keys and a fresh set of envelopes, legal confirmations, finalized, trust transfers, a letter from the Women's Coalition she helped build, asking her to speak at their next event. She thanked him. He didn't say much, just looked at her like he was proud to know her. Then he left. The house was silent, peacefully so. She rolled through the hallway, her fingers grazing the walls. In the living room, a photo of her parents still sat on the bookshelf. Next to it, a picture of her and Marcus from law school. Back when her legs worked and her heart hadn't been broken yet, she smiled at the memory. Then she entered her bedroom and saw it, a small folded paper on her pillow. Her breath caught. She opened it slowly, half expecting it to sting. But it didn't. It read, "Thank you for showing me the truth. I'm raising this child not to become him. I hope someday she's even a little like you. Lila." Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed, the note pressed to her heart. She had not seen Lila since the Iowa livestream, but this letter was enough. It told her everything that mattered. The cycle would not continue. That night, Eleanor lit a single candle on her desk. She took out the old, locked journal, the one she'd started the night Grant posted his anniversary betrayal. The leather cover was cracked now, its pages full of rage, heartbreak, and quiet planning. She opened to the last page, picked up her pen, and wrote, "I didn't survive him. I outlived him." She closed the journal. Outside, waves crashed against the shore. She rolled to the window, pulled it open, and let the breeze touch her face. She thought of Lila, somewhere far away, holding a baby that would never know the man who tried to break them both. She thought of the women who'd emailed her, some survivors, some still living in fear. And she thought of her own silence, once wrapped in guilt and paralysis, now transformed into something unshakable. The house was hers, the truth was hers, and for the first time in years, the future was hers too. Meanwhile, in a small prison cell, barely big enough for regret, Grant stared at the ceiling. No silk sheets, no headlines praising his empire. Just a cot, 4 walls, and a name that no longer opened doors. He thought of Eleanor. He thought of what she must be doing now. And for the first time, the man who once mocked her wheelchair wondered what it would be like to carry weight you could never walk away from. A week later, the New York Times featured a headline above a full-page spread, "From Silence to Strength, Eleanor Langford and the Women Who Would Not Break." The photo showed Eleanor on a stage, surrounded by women of all ages, some in chairs, some holding signs, others simply standing with fists raised, not in anger but in triumph. The caption read, "Justice at last is not always loud, but it is permanent." And in the corner of the article, Lila had written her own words. "We believed him once. Now we believe each other." The candle on Eleanor's desk burned low, but it didn't go out. She watched the flame dance, then whispered, "It's over." But in truth, it wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of everything she'd never been allowed to imagine. The end.